How you guys doing? Thanks so much for coming out this afternoon. My name is Rob Moynihan. I'm a senior writer at TV Guide magazine, and let's get this conversation started. Please welcome from The Big Bang Theory. She plays Bernadette, Melissa Rauch.
How's everyone doing? Thank you guys all for coming. Appreciate it.
So we just watched an episode from season 8, but I want to kind of go to the beginning of your Big Bang journey. Because you've had a very interesting journey. Can you talk about the audition process for this show?
So I originally auditioned just for a guest star part. It was just supposed to be a one-time thing, and I was a fan of the show. And I remember that when I got the email about the audition, I was having a conversation with a couple friends who are also actors, and we were talking about like just how hard it is, and we were all just sitting there just basically bitching about not getting work and how hard it is being out of work. And I remember being so excited. I was a fan of the show, and my father was a huge fan of the show. He's very particular about his TV, but this was one that he really liked, and it was something that we talked about. And so I went in for the audition. It was also one of those auditions where you went in and you just saw like 1,000 different versions of you, like all around, and like there was girls like lining the hall, and I'm like, oh, again, really? And as you can see, I felt very beaten down at the time. And I had just been on the phone with my mom, who has a very high-pitched voice. So that's kind of, and I wasn't planning on doing her voice. And as I was kind of thinking about it, and when I was sitting in the waiting room, and I just decided to try it as an imitation of my mother. And the glasses I knew that I had in my bag, those I put on.
How does she feel about the imitation?
She's like, that doesn't sound like me at all. I don't what talking about? Her voice, she's very Jersey, so it's Bernadette with a Jersey accent. It's not full on an imitation, and especially now because I told her that it's an imitation of her, she tries to make her voice lower, but it almost sounds robotic because she'll start off and she'll be like, that doesn't sound like me.
Well, and this was for the season finale of season 3, was it? Is that when the guest role started, I think?
Yeah, it came in season 3, and then I think it was the end of my first week as a guest star there, I got a call that they might be having me back for more, and they put a pin in me for a couple more. So then I was just waiting by my phone for a couple weeks until they called me back, but I was just so excited. And when you come in as a guest star, I always say it like feels like you're a foreign exchange student. You don't know who you're going to sit with at lunch, or but everyone there was just so welcoming from the beginning, and it was a dream.
Well, when you came in and then you got promoted to series regular, it was you and Mayim together.
Yes.
Did you kind of have a bond between you guys, going into an established show at that time? What is that like for an actor, and is it easier to do it with another actor by your side?
I definitely think it made it easier that Mayim and I were kind of going into it together. The cast themselves just made it so easy and seamless because they were just so loving and welcoming, and that could be a recipe for disaster, having people come in to an already established show. And I was nervous, actually, as a fan of a show, that I was going to disrupt everything. Like, what if I ruin the show that I like so much? Like, selfishly, I didn't want me to lose a show that I like watching. But I think that the writers were very strategic in how they orchestrated that integration, and that it was very slow, and they kind of just ease the audience into our characters rather than shoving it in your face of like, here are new 2 regulars, take it or leave it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of the success of your character had to do with your chemistry and your relationship with Simon Helberg too. What was it like? Did you work with him kind of before you started with everybody else to kind of nail that down, or was that a separate process, I guess, than working with the rest of the cast?
Simon, I cannot say enough good things about that guy. He's one of the most generous and kind people. The whole cast, actually, like there's not a bad seed amongst them. They're just all so wonderful. They've all just become like family. And Simon, of course, we work, like you said, very closely together. And he's just such a great guy with such natural comedic instincts that he's so easy to work off of because he gives you so much and he's so right there with you. So we didn't really do anything specific to work together other than just they do such a wonderful job with creating layers to these characters, and Simon just brings so much to that, and he's got such a big heart, and I think you see that in this character. Especially, I think it's been so nice how they've evolved his character. And I think when this season, the series started, you would think he would be the last person to be domesticated, and I just love how much heart they brought to that role.
Bernadette tamed the ladies' man.
She knows how to crack a whip.
I mean, what characteristics of Bernadette did you connect with the most when you first read this part?
I think when the character started, she was a little bit like dimmer. Like she didn't get a lot of jokes. Everything kind of went over her head, and there was a naivete to her, which I don't necessarily relate to it, but there was just I kind of modeled it after different people, and the thing that I really like about the character that they've kind of done over the years is give her different layers and give her different levels to play, and they've also really made her flawed, and I love playing flawed characters. I think that it's always much more fun to play in general, but I think there's a tendency, especially with women, to make a character likable. And I think with Bernadette, everything's coming from a good place, but she may not always go about it in the right way, whether she's yelling at the people at work or yelling at Howard. I think
a lot
of yelling. So that's just really fun to get to dive into.
Well, it's interesting, too, because the first 3 seasons of the show, it was very much about the scientific, nerdy guys trying to get the hot girls' attention. But then with the introduction of Bernadette and with Amy, you have 2 strong, female scientists in the field of science that came in. How do you feel that changed the overall dynamic of the show? Did you hear from fans at that time about how, it's great to see, kind of female voices in science be introduced?
I got a lot of death threats. No, there was nothing. Everyone's been very, very supportive, which is nice. I think that what was interesting was seeing what these characters did to the dynamic of the group in general, and giving these, being able to open up the characters in other ways, like seeing, of course, how Sheldon reacts to Amy, or how Howard reacts when he actually falls in love with someone and it makes an emotional connection rather than just a sexual connection. And I think that it was also really neat to have, Penny's always been, at the beginning of the series, she was teaching the boys about this other side of life that they were kind of clueless about, and then being able to see her in female relationships and that dynamic, I think, really gave the show different places to go.
Yeah. How's your scientific knowledge in real life?
Terrible. Terrible.
You get a lot of crazy scientific dialogue on this show. What's the thing you've struggled with the most over the last few years?
Oh man, Jim really, he has the lion's share, the hard stuff, and Mayim, of course, actually knows everything that comes out of her mouth. That what I put her through, I treat her as if she's a real doctor. She's like, I may have my PhD, but stop asking me about your cold. I don't need to hear it. I think, I'm trying to think. I don't know that I've had anything that was super, super tough. I think, there was nothing. There was something. I think we did something once on a strain of gonorrhea or something that I was like, I'll just look that up to see exactly what that is, so I know what I'm talking. I don't need to read anymore. That's good. I need to educate myself more on that.
What about sci-fi comic world? Are you more into not so much?
Not so. I know I should learn more about it considering our fan base, but also not up on it as much. I'm a geek in other ways.
What other ways?
Just all we were talking about backstage. I'm just a TV junkie in general. I'm a TV nerd. I'm a theater nerd. Like as a kid, I was a comedy nerd. Like I would listen to, old comedy albums and stuff, and it was weird. I'd like go to the library and like watch the Carol Burnett show. And my parents were like, you should go outside. Like I even went to, I couldn't make it at a real camp, like a real summer camp. I went for like a week and they had me do archery and I was like, no. I was like sunburned and bug bitten, so they sent me to like an indoor camp where you meditated and never saw the light of day and put on skits. And I ended up going there until I was like 22. Like they had to kick me out. Like get out, you're done.
Who would you say were your comedy idols then, growing up?
It was definitely Carol Burnett, Lucille Ball, Gilda Radner, Carol Kane. Those were. I had like a big shrine on my wall growing up to all the comedy greats. And I actually, when I was, I guess I was 15 years old, I went to go see Carol Burnett in Moon Over Buffalo on Broadway, and I wrote her a letter about how much she meant to me and how I wanted to be like her when I grew up. And I stood by the stage door till it was over. And I gave the letter to the stage manager before the show, and then I waited outside to see if she would come out. And the stage manager, I think because I'm under 5 feet tall, thought I was much younger than I was. And he was like, hey, little girl, you want to come back and say hi? So I was in the green room with my mother, and I was like, don't say anything. I have to get her advice. I need to find out what I need to do. And she walked in, and she was so lovely, and I was totally starstruck. And the only thing I got out was, you were good. And then, and she had a camera, and she said, oh, do you want to take a picture together? No, I had a camera. She saw my camera. She said, would you like a picture? And the only thing I got out was, after that, was, I have a picture of you in my room. It's on my wall. And she was like, oh, well, that's lovely. Thank you. Thank you. And the picture, I look like my face looks like it's about to explode. It's still in my childhood bedroom, that picture on the wall next to my shrine.
That's amazing. That's pretty great.
Thank you.
Well, Big Bang Theory, you just wrapped up season 8. I think the show definitely, in over 8 seasons, has turned into this great ensemble comedy. Can you pinpoint a moment where you personally saw that kind of shift in dynamic to this is just a great ensemble comedy right now?
I think there was a couple moments. There was an episode. This was very early on where it was the Rick Fox episode where we went to the convention, and there was the boardroom scene, like the convention scene, and we were all like fighting with each other, but to the audience. That was one, and I remember just being so excited because it was one of my first scenes with the whole cast. There was that, and then the scavenger hunt episode was a very big ensemble episode, and that was so much fun to do.
Yeah, and that was great too because you got to pair off with different people that you might not necessarily have worked with before.
Yes.
I think you were with Johnny in that one, right?
And Johnny and I think, have only been paired together a few times, and we had so much fun working together. It's always so exciting when you get the script, and it's kind of like, which lottery am I going to win this week? Because there's no bad pairing, but it's always so exciting. Jim and I were very excited for the Christmas episode because we don't get to be paired together a lot, and we both, when we read the script at the same time, we're like, we get to work together this week. It was very exciting.
Well, I think the episode we just saw was the one with the beauty pageant flashback, and I have to ask about that. Was that influenced by any real life event, or?
Well, I don't know that if it was influenced, but they were, we were talking about different embarrassing things from past, and they came up with this fantastic pageant moment. I did, as a child, as I said, I was obsessed with comedy, and so I would look for any place I could to do my version of stand-up comedy. I was like 6 or 7, and so like at a camp talent show or anywhere, I would want to get up and do like celebrity impressions or stand-up, which was essentially like ripping off other comic stuff that I didn't realize you're not supposed to do. So I got a brochure in the mail for the Cinderella Scholarship Pageant, and I was not an attractive child. Like I had no teeth. Like there was always like a lopsided pigtail. I just didn't have it together. But in this pageant, there was a talent portion. And so I begged my parents to let me do it so that I could do. And I know that they were apprehensive because they knew I wasn't like the pageant type. So they said, like, if you save up your money, save up half the money and we'll let you do it. And I ended up like doing chores for like the entire neighborhood and saved it up. And then they let me do it. So I did do a couple pageants for the talent. Like everything else, when I had to do the like, hi, my name's Melissa, it was always like me lisping or really nervous and in like a flower girl dress from like my uncle's wedding, while all the other girls were like in like real toddler and tiara dresses. But the pageants, like the pageant talent shows, were something that I loved doing. Very out of place.
So how was filming this episode then?
It was so much fun. I was so excited when I got the script for that. And I think I was in hair and makeup longer than I was for the actual filming of it. It took like 3 hours to get the piles of curls on top of my head and all that makeup. And then the dress was like a big production. I had like 4 people around me balancing me onto the set.
Well, this season also, you touched on some real life tragedy on the show, especially in the Howard storyline with Carol Ann Susie's passing, who would provide the voice of Howard's mother. What was that like on set when you heard the news and then heard that you were going forward with the storyline to ultimately pay tribute and to honor her?
Well, first, we were all just beyond devastated with Carol Ann's passing. She was such an amazing, wonderful lady who just was the embodiment of love and passion and she just loved what she did so much. And so we were all just wrecks over it. And I thought the writers, once again, did an exquisite job and such an elegant job with how they handled it. And I think, especially in comedy, it's very hard handling these heavy episodes because you don't want it to be a very special episode of. And I thought the fact that when they did tackle it, it was in the end of an episode. And much like when we get this terrible kind of news in real life, it comes out of the blue. You're usually concentrating on the minutia that we all get caught up with in everyday life. And then it slaps you in the face as, oh, shit, that just gave me some major perspective. And sorry, can I curse in here? I apologize.
You can.
I just dropped an S-bomb. All right. I can?
Yeah.
All right, let's fucking do this. All right. Sorry. Is there any young children here? Okay. Anyway, I thought that the way that it also evolved over the season in that it wasn't just like, okay, she's passed, and now the next episode we're all totally fine. The fact that it was Howard really struggling with when you do lose a parent or a loved one, how it affects you and how Howard had that line this season of, I'm never going to talk to her again. And it was such a beautiful moment. And I thought Simon, once again, just did perform that moment so beautifully. And it was every time he did it, whether in rehearsal or when we were shooting the live show, I mean, it was so gut-wrenching because I think for all of us, hearing him say, I'm never going to talk to her again, we all were just thinking, we're never going to be on set with Carolina again and hear her awesome, awesome voice. And I just thought, the Howard and Mrs. Wolowitz relationship has always been not only hilarious, but, it was very, I guess, layered with all this hostility, but you knew under it was just so much love, and the fact that we really got to see how much he meant to him, and that it wasn't just this screaming back and forth relationship, that it was, she was his first love.
I feel like it really kind of brought Bernadette and Howard a lot closer together in that dinner scene or that dinner episode. Bernadette really kind of steps up as kind of a motherly figure to the entire group even, and kind of brings everybody together. How did you see kind of Bernadette's transformation after this event? Do you see that kind of her stepping up into that role?
Yeah, for sure. I think that with any tragedy that you have in real life, it can bring a relationship closer together, or sometimes it could tear it apart. And I thought that, for all the bickering that Howard and Bernadette do sometimes, I love the fact that we got to see her being really protective of him and protective of his healing, and the fact that that dinner was supposed to be for this closure and the celebration of his mother. And I love that they wrote that in, and I felt very honored to be able to pay tribute to Carol Ann as well in that episode.
I know whenever we talk, I always ask you about the big Howard and Bernadette question that we get most from our readers of when are they going to start a family of their own? Do you see a baby in their future? Do you think that they could, that either one of them could handle that kind of responsibility?
Well, they did early on. They touched on it that Bernadette was very opposed to having children, and then I think like maybe she got a little more open to it when they were taking care of Cinnamon, Raj's dog, which is always a good test
like
to
a
see,
child.
just like a child. But I don't know. I don't know, if it's something that they'll do in the near future. I kind of think, I always joke around that between Bernadette's voice and the genes from Mrs. Wolowitz's voice, the cry on that baby would be so insane that I don't know if viewers would want to tune in for that.
Well, one of my other favorite Bernadette moments this year was drunk Bernadette in the Las Vegas episode. And a lot of actors say, it's playing drunk is one of the hardest things to do. But what was it like doing that scene in that episode? Because it was you and Mayim, basically the drunk ones, and Kaylee being the sober,
Right.
responsible one in that episode.
Well, it wasn't that difficult because I'm drunk all the time. I'm plastered right now. I think no, it was. It was so much fun to play. We had such a blast with that episode, and I thought it was a really great role reversal. That now Penny's the more studious one, and that I was Amy and I that were going crazy. And I love the physicality of that episode. Normally, Bernadette is very just upright, and it's one of the first things that I kind of developed with the character. I kind of always need a way into a character, like whether it's the voice or the physicality. It just helps me kind of open up and figure out what you're doing. So I initially had started out with Bernadette just being like, her posture is much better than mine will ever be. And so it was really fun to get out of Bernadette also wears like really sensible loafers every episode. So it was very fun to put on some high heels and get to do like a wobbly giraffe leg and play with that physical comedy as well.
Yeah. Were you telling me you had a close encounter with one of the extras on that episode?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I got very close to his junk. My husband's here, I apologize. It's funny. We kept it very professional. But yes, the strippers in that episode, it was one take where our director was like, I'm just trying to line up the camera. Melissa, could you just come a little closer to him? Come a little closer. And like, because I'm so short, like my head positioning was just like right there. And he's like, no, raise your hand. I'm like, and it was just very like, I didn't know where to look and make eye contact. Like, it wasn't eye contact, but it was, so I was, I got very, very uncomfortable.
Well, this being a sitcom, they have you do a lot of crazy and wild stuff. I mean, dressing up and everything, too. Is there something that you think is that pops into your head as the craziest thing you've done over the last 5 seasons on this show?
Craziest.
Or just most ridiculous dress up?
The Smurf costume was very intense. That was a lot of time in the makeup chair.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah?
yeah.
Well, I'm curious. You also have a lot of great guest stars on the show. This year, you had Billy Bob Thornton as your surprise guest.
Oh yeah.
What was it like working with him? Because he was a fan of the show, right?
Yes. He was. That was amazing. I was so excited when I found out that he was going to be joining us, and I think his mother was a huge fan of the show, and so he had said publicly that he would love to appear on the show. And then I think our executive producer, Steve Maloro, and Chuck had called him and spoke to him about doing an appearance, and it happened pretty quickly, and he was one of the nicest people. He was so kind and humble, and really he hadn't done multicamera in a while, and he was just really like almost a student of the whole experience, and just wanted it to be great. And he's just, can't say enough good things about him. It was just so wonderful having him there, and he was so funny.
What about and Bob Newhart you had for a while too? Do you have any? You've got to have a Bob Newhart story from working with him.
I do have a Bob
All
Newhart
right.
story. Well, but it's more of just an embarrassing story. And I've told this once before, so apologies if you've heard it. But he has always been one of my favorite comedians. Again, my father loved him. That was one of the shows that my father liked before Big Bang Theory. And I used to listen to Bob's comedy albums growing up. And so my first encounter with Bob was we did the table read, and he was hilarious. And I went to his dressing room, was where our green room normally is, and so I passed by it on the way to my room, and then I walked by it again, and then I was like, should I go in? And I walked by it again, and then similar to my Carol Burnett story, I went in, and most of my stories involve me just being extremely awkward and almost getting kicked out of some place. So I went up to him, and we had a wonderful conversation about comedy, and I come from stand-up background, so we were talking about that and how it translates to multicam sitcom, and we had a great conversation, and then I didn't know how to end this great conversation, and I was also like really proud of myself that I kept it together to be able to have that conversation. So I was also kind of patting myself on the back in my head as I'm like ending the conversation of like, you didn't humiliate yourself, great. And then as it's ending, it's Bob Newhart, and I'm like, I feel weird like turning my back on him as I exit the room. And so I did like a weird bow, like backwards, and I went, thank you for the laughter. And like backed out very weirdly, and he was very kind and gracious. And then I was like, would you like something from craft service? And he was like, no, I'm leaving your room. Goodbye, Bob.
But he was great.
He was wonderful. He's
Yeah,
wonderful.
Yeah. Is there a guest star that surprised you the most? I mean, you have a lot of people from the scientific community come in, a lot of people who might not necessarily have a lot of comedy background. Is there somebody who maybe you didn't know or weren't familiar with that really surprised you and stepped up?
Well, Stephen Hawking, that was absolutely incredible having him there, and he was just so hidden. He came with a group of people, and they were all so kind. And he just had such a great sense of humor about it. And what took me back about it, he had the softest hands. When we shook hands, I was like, those are the most angelic hands I've ever touched in my life. It was very, yeah. That's a little. I just name dropped Stephen Hawking's hands.
You can do that.
I can.
You can do that.
I can. I'm sure next time I see him, I'll be like, "You have lovely hands. I enjoyed touching them."
Yeah, it's an interesting time for network comedy in general. You know, a lot of new shows have started up but nothing's really quite hit like The Big Bang Theory has over the last 8 years. What do you think the secret to this show's success is? Why is it so, not just in this country, but worldwide? It is a phenomenon across the world.
It's crazy. I mean, it's something I'm so eternally grateful for, and if I knew exactly what it was, I'd be like, I'm writing this next. This is the formula. I think, well, the writing is so fantastic. I think the architects behind it are just geniuses, and Chuck and Bill and Steve and the whole team of writers. I think they just do an incredible, incredible job, and they work so tirelessly, and they're really perfectionists. Like, at our tapings, we don't move on until a joke is like the laughter is explosive. They'll never take like, oh, that was a good laugh. Like it needs to be a 10, and so they'll recraft a joke or they'll do a joke alt that they come up with on the spot, and it's amazing. They really are they are like Olympians of joke writing and story crafting. And so I really do think that has the most to do with it. And I also think like giving a show a chance to breathe and let characters develop and letting an audience find it, I think is so important, because shows, they take a while to really start figuring out where to go. And I think, like I was saying a little bit before about Simon and how his character has had a chance to evolve, all the characters, really, you really rarely get that opportunity in a half-hour show, especially, to see how these characters have changed over the years. And I think it's really special, and I think that I think people can connect to that. And I think also there's the fact that this is a group of underdogs, and I think everyone, whether they're into science or comic books or weirdly harassing comedians in a weird way, like myself, I think we can all relate to being an underdog at some point in our lives, and I think that's really resonated.
Well, being a comedy writer yourself and having played this character for as long as you have, is there any collaboration between you or the actors and the writers' room, or is it kind of a separation of, church and state?
It's definitely a separation. They're so phenomenal at what they do that I wouldn't want to mess with their perfection. And really, like, there's such a musicality to how they write also. So we really do, I mean, everything is pretty much word for word, because you mess up a word and then the notes are off and then you've ruined their whole concerto.
So no room for improv then?
No, not on this show. We stick to what they've crafted.
Talking to a lot of actors in comedy, there's the big multicam versus single cam debate as to what you like, what you prefer doing. Do you prefer multicam over single cam? What's the different energy like when you're doing one or the other?
I prefer a job, so
That's fair.
I like. No, I honestly I think if it's good. What? Did someone say something? No. Oh, okay. Cool. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think I think if it's good material, it's good material. I had never done multicam before, so I was really excited to try it. And there's something. It's so much fun. The energy there is electric on tape night. It really is the best of both worlds because it feels like you're doing theater, but it's on camera, and then you also have a chance if you mess up to go back. But it's and you're also kind of, it's almost like, in a way, almost like a choose your own adventure theater, because if it doesn't totally work, then they're able to change it. But the writers really are so in tune to these characters that it's rare that they're doing major changes on a tape night. It's really more just joke alts and or punching something up. But they're incredible with what they do. I think I did single cam before, and I also loved it. And I think it just depends on the material for sure. If something's good writing, then I think it can transcend any form.
As the show has gotten more popular over the years, have you seen that energy grow or change on those tape nights, or has it always pretty much been pretty explosive?
I came into it when it was already pretty popular, and so it was already like amazing on those nights. I think it's gotten like even more so since I've been there. But I'm sure like earlier on, if you ask some of the castmates who were there from the beginning, they would say that it's gotten, even more energetic. But what's also really interesting is that the people are so invested in these characters, and that's, I think, where it differs from theater in that, if you go see a play, you're just learning who these characters are, whereas people who come to our tapings, they already know these characters. The laughs are coming from because they know where that person's coming from. But what's also really interesting is they're already so invested in these characters and they care about them so much that the audience really gets pissed off if we're too mean to each other. And you hear, like, there was an episode early on in mine and Howard's relationship where I was just being a jerk to him. And the audience didn't like it, and you felt it, and there was a lot of oohs. And so they kind of course corrected and softened it, which was really interesting. It's nice. It's like having a focus group right there to be like, here's that.
What's the most unique fan experience that you've had on this show?
Let's see.
'Cause you've done the Comic-Con circuit and everything, yeah.
Comic-Con, I had in the ladies' room, I had like a weird painted green hand reach under the stall asking for an autograph, that was really weird. The voice thing, I think, like, throws people off. So if people are coming up to me sometimes, like, they're not sure if it's me, So then I'll kind of do what my mom will do, and I'll like lower my voice even more if I'm not wanting to get into it. But a lot of times like people come up to me because I don't have the glasses or the voice on. They'll be like, "Are you Bernadette?" No, yeah, no, she's much shorter than you, or yeah, oh yeah, no, you're better looking than her, or something like that. I'm like, all right.
Well, I want to get into some of these audience questions that you guys submitted. The first one here is from Sandy, and this actually goes back to the writer's question that we were talking about earlier. But when did you feel that you had the rhythm of the writers? When did it click for you? Was it right away, or did it take a while?
I think, like what I was saying, there is such a rhythm and a musicality to it that I think it was kind of easy to fall into because they set up comedy so well that it's very, it's almost like you kind of relax into it. It feels like you're sitting in like a big comfy couch or something, because when like you get a script and it just feels off and you just can't, I don't know how I'm going to get into it. It doesn't sound like it's natural. And I never had that issue with Big Bang because they really, they know exactly how to write, even for characters that they're just creating. I remember getting the audition material for Bernadette, and it was fantastic. It was almost like a scene you would do in acting class because the rhythms were already there, and it was just so much fun to play.
This one is from Catherine, and she asks, what was the archetype that you got categorized in during audition processes, and did it work well in booking jobs?
Let's see. Well, once I went out for an actual little person. So that was something I got. It was a commercial audition to play an elf. I believe it was like for a Staples commercial. I went there, and it was actually, I was the only person who wasn't a little person, and they were all like, "What are you doing here?" It was, they were like getting like major looks. I've never felt so tall in my life. But it was like the quirky. Quirky was one that I used to get a lot. Quirky, petite. This was one I used to, left of center would come in. Usually it was like, I'm trying to think, cute and peppy sometimes. One of my first auditions when I first moved to LA from New York, which was a big wake-up call, this script, it called for the ugliest person you'll ever meet was the audition. And I was like, welcome to LA. This is great. I mean, it was a very liberating audition because I went in with like no makeup on and like sweatpants. And the girl who got it was gorgeous. So gorgeous. And people like, it just shows you that's Hollywood for you.
Well, this one is from Trip, and he says your new film is excellent, and you do have a new film.
Thanks, Trip.
Yep.
How'd you see it? Thanks.
Do you have any plans to write or produce other projects? And I guess kind of piggybacking off of that, what does your schedule permit with Big Bang to kind of to go off and do other projects like the film?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Trip. I really appreciate that. We're very excited. It's coming out October 16th. It's called The Bronze, and I'm super, super excited about it. I play a bronze medal winning gymnast who hasn't done anything with her life in the 10 years since winning, and she's very bitter and washed up, and it was very fun to do. I co-wrote it with my husband, and it's been a really huge learning experience, and it's kind of my baby, and I'm very excited to share it with all of you in the fall. And yes, I would love to write and produce more. I've always kind of felt that most of the work that I've gotten was something that was self-generated, and I am the biggest advocate of that. It's always, as an actor, you're always waiting for that next job. And when I was in New York and like waiting tables and doing stand-up, I wrote a show with my husband that was called The Miseducation of Jenna Bush, and I did that in New York, which was very fun, very fun. That kind of got me out of waitressing and brought me out here. And so this movie was like another incarnation of that, because a lot of times when you're doing TV work, you're kind of put in that box. And I knew that this was a role that if I wanted to play, I was going to have to create it for myself. And So I feel so lucky that it came to fruition. We're currently working on another script that we're attaching directors to right now. It's called The Troop, and it's kind of like Troop Beverly Hills meets Bridesmaids, like a reboot of that. And so we're hoping to do that soon. It's really what I love to do in my free time is just write and create, and it makes me feel like you have some control in this world, in this business, and it's just it's something that I've always just kind of latched onto as a great way to take a new road in this business. And what was the other part of that? Oh, the schedule,
yeah.
Right. So the schedule, we shoot from, we go back in August and then we end in April. So like last summer I shot my movie I think we went into pre-production like around this time last year, and then we shot up until I went back to work in August. So we have our summer hiatuses to do whatever project we want to do. Like Jim and Kunal are both in New York. So if you're in New York, go see their shows. They're both fantastic in them. Simon's shooting a movie this summer, and I think it's a great, nice size break to be able to do what we want to do. And then as far as writing goes, it helps that I live with my husband because we really don't leave the house. We just write together.
Excellent. Well, before we wrap up, I'm curious. We usually ask everybody before we finish these panels here, especially at SAG, what's the best acting advice that you've ever received, and what advice would you give to up-and-coming actors?
I think just a continuation of what I was just saying about if you're not necessarily getting the work that you want to get, I think creating it for yourself in some form or fashion, I think is a great way, even if it's just to get in front of people who can represent you, or maybe someone will see you and put you in their play, or you'll meet someone who you can collaborate further with. I think that's one of the hardest things about this business is the lack of control, along with the rejection and just feeling like, well, I love and it's also because it's so close to your heart. It's a profession that it's not like, oh, when I was going from like waitressing job to waitressing job, it sucked. Like if a job didn't work out, but it was more so because like you're looking for that next paycheck. Whereas when you don't get an acting job, it hurts in your heart because you love doing it so much. You're like, just give me a chance to do what I love. I was going to curse again, and I held myself back. So I think that writing your own stuff, is such a great way to do it. When I was doing stand-up in New York, that always felt great because it was a release to be able to, okay, well, I know I'm going to get up on stage tonight, even if it means that I have to hand out some flyers on the street in order to get stage time. At least I know I'm going to perform. So I think like just reminding yourself that you can get up and do your craft anywhere, just to remind you of that passion, even if it's an acting class, or if it's writing something with a friend and putting it up at a small theater, or taking improv classes. I think just creating an opportunity for yourself to remember why you're doing it in the first place, so that it gives you the burst of energy to keep on going, because I think so much of it is perseverance and just sticking with it. One more thing, I remember being on a phone call with my mom in New York at the sports bar I was working at that was like ripping the life out of me. And I remember just like sobbing on the phone, like, I don't know that I could do this anymore. And in her Bernadette sounding voice, she's like, don't worry about it, just keep going, just keep going. And it really is like, just keep going, because there will be that thing, even if it's just that, one day on a show, it'll remind you of why you're doing it in the first place. And if it's what you love to do, then that's what you have to do, and there's no choice. So keep doing it.
Excellent. Well, on that note, thank you guys for coming. Thank you,
you.
Melissa, for being here.
Thank you,
Watch
guys.
The Big Bang Theory.
Thank you.
Thank you.